It was 11:38 p.m., on the stormy night of October 27, 2023. The rain hit my window in rapid pulses, and the wind outside moved like it carried voices, soft, broken whispers slipping through the cracks. I was sitting alone in my grandfather's study, a room untouched for years since he passed away. Beside me was my dog Rufus, a German shepherd with nerves of steel, except tonight. He sat rigid, eyes locked on the far end of the room where shadows seemed to flicker even without light. That night, I found something that changed everything. I had been going through boxes of my grandfather's old possessions, maps, journals, tools. He was an explorer in his early days, known for venturing into places no one else dared. But one box was different. It was sealed with black wax, unmarked, dusty, and buried deep in the attic floor. When I finally broke the seal, what I found inside felt wrong. A worn leather pouch. Inside it, a single object, a map that was fragile, hand-drawn in charcoal and red ink. But something about it made my skin crawl. In the center, circled 3 times in blood-red strokes, was a location, Wraithmoor House. The name alone stopped me cold. Growing up, I had heard stories about Wraithmoor. Everyone in town had. They said it was built in 1823 by the Crowhurst family, wealthy, reclusive, and heavily involved in dark rituals during the 1800s. Locals claimed the family believed the house stood at a thin place, a spot where the veil between the living and the dead was weakest. One by one, every Crowhurst vanished. No bodies. No signs of escape. The house was abandoned, boarded up, and eventually erased from all official maps. People who entered, paranormal investigators, urban explorers, even hikers, either went missing or returned, different. The townspeople stopped talking about it. The land was declared cursed. What terrified me was not just that this map led directly to it, but that in the corner was a fresh signature. My grandfather's. He had died in 1993. Beneath his name were 6 chilling words: "You must finish what I began." That I stared at it, heart pounding, while Rufus let out a low whimper I had never heard before. Suddenly, my study lamp flickered. And then, the old wall clock stopped ticking. I do not know why I felt compelled to go. Maybe it was the mystery. Maybe it was the fact that my grandfather had never told anyone about this. Or maybe the house wanted me to, but what I did not realize was this. Some houses are not just haunted. They are waiting. Why did my grandfather hide the map for decades, and why did he want me to finish what he started? What really happened inside Wraithmoor House in 1823 that erased an entire bloodline overnight? And most importantly, what is already watching us before we even arrive? If you want to uncover the secrets buried within Wraithmoor House and follow every terrifying step of this journey, like this video and subscribe. The truth is darker than you think. It took me 2 days to build up the nerve to follow the map. Every time I looked at it, I felt like it had changed. Like the lines were moving ever so slightly when I was not watching. I packed light. A flashlight. A charged phone. A small voice recorder. Water. Some food for Rufus. I told no one where I was going. Not even my closest friends. I just got in the car, put Rufus in the passenger seat, and drove toward the woods near Miller's Hollow. The road disappeared faster than I expected. 1 minute I was on the highway, the next I was on gravel, then dirt, then nothing. No signs. No houses. Just trees closing in from both sides. The sun was beginning to dip behind the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed too tall for the trees that made them. My GPS had stopped working over 30 minutes ago. The air was heavy, like it was holding its breath. Finally, I saw it. Wraithmoor House. It did not rise from the ground. It leaned. As if it had been standing for far too long and had started to give in. The roof was warped. The wood along the walls was blackened, not just from age, but from something deeper, mold, rot, maybe something else. Windows were either shattered or boarded. The porch sagged in the middle like it could collapse under the weight of a whisper. Yet despite its ruin, the house had presence. It did not feel abandoned. It felt waiting. Rufus started barking before I even stepped out of the car. He had never barked like that. Not in fear. In warning. I got out slowly, trying to calm him, but he would not follow. He stayed in the car, eyes locked on the house, growling low in his throat that I approached the front gate, which had long since fallen off its hinges. The path was overgrown. Vines and weeds reached up my legs like fingers. Every step closer, the air grew colder. I reached the porch. The wood creaked beneath me. I reached for the door handle, expecting it to be locked, but the door opened as soon as I touched it. Inside, the air smelled like wet stone and rusted metal. My flashlight flickered for a second even though the batteries were new. The first room looked like someone had left in a hurry. Furniture was overturned. Old plates still sat on the dining table, covered in dust and ash. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and behind that, I could see scratches. Not claw marks. Finger marks. Dozens of them. Desperate, Rufus was still barking outside. Louder now that I took one step further into the house and heard something behind me. Not a noise. A feeling. The door had closed. I turned fast, reached for the handle. It would not move. That I remember thinking, maybe the floorboards shifted. Maybe the house settled. But the way that door shut, silent and sudden, it felt like intention, and then I saw it. On the floor, just ahead of me, half covered in ash. Another map. Identical to the one my grandfather left me. But this one was burned at the edges and had something else written on it. It said, "You are too late." What did that mean? Too late for what? Why would my grandfather lead me to a place that wanted me gone the moment I arrived? And most of all, who left this second map, and why is it waiting inside a house that should be empty? After reading those words on the burned map, "You are too late," something in me shifted. I could feel it in my chest. Not panic. Not fear. Just that quiet certainty that something was already in motion and I had stepped into it too late to back out. The door had closed behind me. Rufus was still barking outside, more desperate now, but I was not sure if it was at me or at something else he could sense inside. The house was darker than it had any right to be. The flashlight was working, but the shadows still clung to the corners of the walls like they did not want to leave. I walked further in, past the main hallway. The air was heavy, like the kind you feel before a thunderstorm, and everything in that place creaked. Not like a house settling. Like a house breathing. That I came to a narrow passage. On the right, a staircase that led up but looked too weak to hold weight. On the left, a long hallway with 4 doors, 3 shut tight, one slightly open. That I do not know why I chose the one that was already open. Maybe because part of me believed something wanted me to. Or maybe because I was hoping I would find something that explained what this place really was and why my grandfather had led me here. I stepped in. The room was cold. Colder than outside. The wallpaper was peeling off in thick curls. The ceiling sagged. A broken chandelier hung sideways, its crystals scattered across the floor. But what caught my attention immediately was the door on the far end of the room. It was different from the others. Not old. Not rotted. It was solid, dark oak, reinforced with heavy metal rivets, and had a single iron handle, rusted but still strong. That door should not have been open, but it was. Just an inch. Enough for air to escape from the space behind it. Cold air. Like something had been locked in there for years and had not seen light. That I moved slowly. Each step felt wrong. Like I was walking into someone else's memory. My hand touched the edge of the door and I paused. I had this feeling, deep, low, and steady, that the moment I pulled that door open, something was going to change. Maybe for me. Maybe for this whole place. That I pulled. The door opened with no sound. Behind it was a staircase. Stone. Descending at a sharp angle into pure black. That I stood at the top, listening. That at first, nothing, then I heard it, footsteps, but not from below, from behind me that I turned fast, but the room was exactly the same. No movement. No sound. Nothing, except now, the door I had entered through was shut. That I did not close it, and I knew it had not made a sound when it moved. That I reached for the handle, twisted. Locked. That I turned back to the stairs and pointed my flashlight down, and I saw them, footprints, fresh ones. Clear in the dust. Someone had gone down recently. But there was only one set of prints, not two. Just one. Going down, none coming back up, and that was when it hit me, that door. It had been locked for a reason, and someone or something had come back through it and left it open. That I do not know what was down there. Not yet. But the prints, they looked small. Not a man's. Not a woman's either. They looked like a child's, but there were no children in this house. There had not been for decades. So whose were they? And if someone came through that door before me, why had they never left? If you want to know what I found at the bottom of that staircase, and what those footprints led me to, like this video and subscribe. The next part is where everything starts to change. That I stood at the top of the stairs longer than I probably should have. The kind of hesitation that does not come from fear, but from knowing you are about to cross a line you cannot uncross. The footprints on the steps below were still fresh, untouched. Just one pair. Small, like a child's. That detail alone stuck with me. That I held my flashlight low and took the first step. The sound of my own foot touching that stone echoed too long. It felt like the hallway was swallowing the noise. 23 steps down, and with each one, the air got colder. Not regular basement cold. This was something else. Like the cold you feel when standing somewhere you know you should not be. At the bottom, the space opened into a narrow corridor. Walls made of stone. Damp. Covered in this thin layer of something green, moss maybe, or mold. It was hard to tell in the light I had. The air smelled like wet dirt and something metallic underneath it. Something old. That I started walking, slow. The light from my flashlight cut a weak path ahead of me. I do not know why, but I kept expecting to hear my own footsteps echo back. They never did. No matter how loud they were, they felt muffled. Like the hallway was soaking up the sound. Then, just behind me, I heard it. A whisper, not clear. Not loud. But close. Right behind my left ear. I turned around immediately, but there was nothing. Just the empty stairs leading back up to the locked door. I held my breath and listened. Another whisper. Closer now. A single word, help. I cannot explain what that did to me. It was not fear. It was this strange mix of concern and disbelief. It sounded like a child. A real voice. Not something echoing through the walls. Someone alive. Or something that wanted to sound alive. I took another step forward and the flashlight flickered again, weaker this time. That thing in my chest, that sense that I was being watched, kept growing. And then I started to hear something else. Not a whisper this time. Breathing. Shallow, steady, coming from somewhere above me. I aimed the light up. Nothing but stone ceiling. Cracked in places. There were gaps between the stones. Narrow spaces. Just wide enough for something, and then movement. Quick. Like something shifting out of view the moment I pointed the light at it. I should have turned around. But I did not. I kept moving forward, deeper into the corridor. And that was when I saw it. Another wall, this one with carvings scratched into the surface. I got closer, wiped away some of the grime, and my heart dropped. It was a name. My grandfather's. Not once. Dozens of times. Scratched in as if he had been trapped down there and this was the only thing he could leave behind. The light went out. Everything turned black. Instantly. I could not even see my hand in front of my face. I stood perfectly still, trying to hear something, anything. The silence was absolute. And then footsteps. Slow. Coming from ahead. One step. Then another. Not running. Just walking. Toward me. I tapped the flashlight once. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Third time. It flickered on. The corridor was empty. But the dust on the ground, it had changed. Now there were more footprints. 2 sets. Both small. Both fresh. One set had come from behind me. The other had come from deeper inside. And they stopped right where I was standing. So what was standing with me in that dark? And if my grandfather had been here, if he carved his name over and over again in that stone, why did no one ever find him? I kept staring at those footprints in the dust. 2 sets. Small. Bare. Both fresh. They had appeared out of nowhere while I stood there in the dark. The air was still heavy in my chest. I could feel something close. Not touching me, not yet, but present. Right at the edge of what I could sense. I backed up slowly, 1 step at a time, keeping the flashlight pointed ahead. My body told me not to turn around, not to look anywhere else. Just walk. Just get out of the corridor. And that was exactly what I did. When I reached the stairwell, I stopped. I looked up toward the door I had come through. Still shut. Still locked. There was no way out, not yet. So I went the only direction that felt remotely safe, back toward the rooms above ground. When I stepped out of the corridor and back into the main hallway, the silence hit me even harder than it had the first time. It was like the walls were holding their breath. Rufus was still outside. I could hear him faintly through the window. He was not barking anymore. Just pacing. Whining. He was waiting for me, but I could not reach him yet. Not until I found a way to unlock the door. I passed through the hall and reached a side room I had not explored earlier. It looked like a study. The walls were lined with broken shelves and rotting books. Most of the floorboards were warped, but solid enough to walk on. I noticed something strange immediately. The portraits. They lined the far wall. 9 of them in total. All of them old. Faded oil paintings in thick, black wooden frames. Men and women, all dressed in 1800s clothing. None of them smiled. Their expressions were blank, hollow, drained of life. And their eyes, all of them had the same dead stare. Not the kind artists paint to show mood. These felt different. They looked human. I moved closer to one. A man in his 50s, with a long coat and a silver chain tucked into his waistcoat. His face was weathered, but something in his eyes looked sharp, alert. I turned my head to the side slightly, just curious. His eyes followed me. Not an illusion. Not a trick of the light. I tested it again. Moved left. Then right. Still watching. I stepped back quickly, but then noticed something even worse. The next portrait, a woman, was doing the same thing. So was the third. And the fourth. All of them. I stopped breathing for a moment. I stood in the middle of the room, flashlight shaking in my hand, watching them. Then one of the paintings blinked. I swear it. The man in the third frame. His eyes closed. Just for a moment. Then opened again. No dust moved. No creak. Just that one blink. I took another step back. The floor creaked loud beneath my foot. That was when the lights came on. Not full lights. Just a single bulb in the center of the ceiling, hanging by a loose wire, started to glow faint orange. It should not have worked. The house had no power. No sign of connection. But there it was. Warm light filling the room just enough to show the edges. And that was when I saw it. A 10th portrait. It was covered in cloth. A large one, bigger than the others. Centered above the fireplace. I had missed it before. Or maybe it had not been there. The cloth was stained with something brown. Old. Like it had soaked through from behind. I walked up to it. Slowly. Carefully. I reached up, fingers touching the edge of the fabric. And then I heard it. That voice again. But not a whisper this time. It said clearly. "Do not look." I turned around fast. No one there. I turned back toward the portrait. And the cloth was gone. On the wall was a painting of a child. Wearing a blue coat. Standing in the very hallway I had just come from. With someone standing behind them. Too dark to see their face. But their hand was resting on the child's shoulder. The child was barefoot. Same size as the footprints. And in the bottom corner, painted so faintly it was almost hidden, was a signature. My grandfather's name. Had he painted this? Or was this painted of him? And who was standing behind the child in the dark? I stood in front of the painting, staring into the eyes of a child I had never seen before but somehow felt connected to. The hallway in the background was unmistakable. It was the same one I had just walked through. Every detail matched, down to the curve of the floorboards and the crooked nail in the baseboard. And that hand, the one resting gently on the child's shoulder, it did not belong there. It was darker than the rest of the painting. Not in tone or color. In feeling. The kind of detail that should not be there. The kind that makes the hair on the back of your neck rise, even when you are trying to be logical. Rational. I do not know why I reached for the painting. I think part of me expected the canvas to be blank when I touched it. That maybe none of this was real. That I had imagined it all. But the moment my fingertips brushed the surface, I felt something shift. Not in the room. In the house. It felt like the walls took a breath. The bulb above me flickered, then steadied. The silence grew deeper. Not dead silence. Something else. It felt like a pause. Like the house had stopped moving just to see what I would do next. The frame of the painting was old and heavy. I noticed the edges were slightly warped, as if it had been pulled off and rehung more than once. At the bottom, beneath a chipped section of wood, something thin was tucked between the canvas and the frame. I pried it loose. It was a torn piece of paper. Stiff. Water damaged. But I could still read the writing. It was a note. Short. Scribbled in what looked like charcoal. "They are beneath the floor." That was all it said. No name. No signature. No explanation. But I did not need one. I already knew where it wanted me to go. The cellar. I turned back toward the main hallway. The house felt colder now. As if I had disturbed something that preferred to be left buried. Rufus was quiet outside. I had not heard him in a while, and that made me nervous. He never stayed silent when I was in danger. Unless he felt something worse than danger. I followed the same path back to the heavy cellar door, the one I had seen earlier, the one sealed with rusted iron and nailed boards. The door that had no business being open. Except now, it was not just open. It was wide. The cold rolling out of it was stronger than before. It was not just cold air. It felt like standing at the edge of a cave that had not seen light in centuries. The kind of cold that hums in your bones. I stepped through. The air changed the moment I crossed the threshold. It became thick, hard to breathe, like the air itself was heavier than it should be. The stairs going down were different from the others in the house. These were stone. Worn smooth. As if hundreds of feet had passed over them. Maybe thousands. At the bottom, the space opened up into a wide underground chamber. It smelled of dirt and old wood, like an ancient root cellar. The flashlight beam caught something metallic. Shelves. Chains. Hooks along the walls. And carvings. Hundreds of carvings. Names. Symbols. Numbers. I moved closer. One of the carvings was my grandfather's name. Another name was scratched right beside it. It was mine. Not written recently. Etched in the same faded way. Like it had been there for years. I stepped back. Heart racing. And that was when I heard the voice again. This time it was not a whisper. It was clear. And it said, quietly, almost kindly, "You should not have come." Then the light went out. After the voice in the cellar told me I should not have come, I did not panic. I could not. I was too focused on figuring out what was real and what was not. I had already accepted that the house was not just abandoned. There was something in it. Something aware. But in that moment, I was still holding on to the idea that I could stay calm, stay logical, and get out. I climbed the stone steps back to the main floor, one slow step at a time. The flashlight was still not working, but I could see a faint glow up ahead. By the time I reached the top, the light in the hallway had turned back on. It was dim, but it gave me enough to see. I stepped out of the cellar, turned back, and before I could even catch my breath, the door shut behind me. It did not slam. It just closed. Steady. Quiet. I did not turn the handle again. I just stared at it for a while, trying to understand how a house that should have no power, no movement, no life, was now responding to me like I was inside something that could think for itself. I headed back toward the entrance. As I turned the corner, I heard barking. Rufus. That snapped me out of my thoughts. He had been quiet for too long. Now he was barking louder than before, his voice sharp and clear through the cracked window. I reached the front door and looked out. He was sitting on the porch, facing the tree line just beyond the driveway. At first, I thought he was just reacting to my footsteps, but then I noticed something else. He was not looking at me. He was looking at something out there. I followed his line of sight. The trees were still. No wind. No movement. But I could feel it. I stepped closer to the glass, and that was when Rufus noticed me. He looked at me, tail low, ears up, tense. He wanted to come in. I could see it. He kept shifting his paws like he was getting ready to run to the door, but something held him in place. I tried the lock. It was stuck. I had left it open earlier. I was sure of it. I had never turned the deadbolt. Yet now it was sealed. I jiggled the handle again, harder this time, and called out. "Come here, boy. It is all right. Come here." But he did not move. His body stayed exactly where it was, but his eyes never left the tree line. That was when I realized it. He was not trying to come inside. He was protecting the door. I do not know what he saw, but it was enough to keep him planted. Rufus had been with me for 6 years. He had chased off coyotes. He had stood his ground in a thunderstorm. I had never seen him freeze like that. Whatever was out there was something different. I tapped on the glass. Called to him again. Still nothing. He just kept watch. I stood there for a few more minutes. I watched the trees. I waited for something to step out. But nothing did. Eventually, I gave up on the door. I turned and walked back into the house. Something about it felt different now. Not louder. Just heavier. I could hear the floor creak under my own weight in a way I had not noticed before. The walls felt narrower. The air was dry now, not cold like it had been downstairs, but stale. Like the house had closed itself around me. I kept thinking about that painting. About the child in the hallway, and the hand on their shoulder. The same hallway I was standing in now. And for some reason, I kept remembering what I had found carved into the cellar wall. My name. Right beside my grandfather's. Something was connecting us. But I still had no idea how far back that connection went. Why was the house reacting to me? Why was Rufus so certain something outside should not be let in? And if this place had remembered my grandfather, what else had it not forgotten? I did not go back upstairs right away. After Rufus refused to come inside, and the cellar door shut on its own, I sat down on the bottom step near the entrance hall and tried to think clearly. I told myself to stay focused, stay grounded. I pulled out my phone to check the time. It was 4:11 p.m. That was impossible. I had checked it before I went into the cellar. It had been past 6. I remembered the light outside. The way the sky had already started to go dark. I had been in that house for over an hour. Maybe more. But now the clock had gone backward. I thought maybe it was just my phone. Maybe the battery was dying or the signal was scrambling it somehow. I locked the screen and turned it off to reset it. I counted slowly in my head. 10 seconds. 20. I powered it back on. Still 4:11 p.m. I stepped over to the front window again. Outside, the sky was dim, but not evening dark. Rufus was still there. Still in the same position. Staring toward the woods like he had not moved at all. That was when I started to notice the sound. It was not loud. In fact, it was the quiet that drew my attention to it. There was no ticking. The wall clock in the hallway, the one that had been working earlier, was completely still. The second hand was stuck. It had stopped on the exact same minute my phone was frozen on. 4:11 p.m. I walked over to the clock, reached up, and tapped the glass. Nothing. I opened the back and checked the battery compartment. Fresh batteries. Fully seated. It should have been working. But the clock had stopped. I left it alone and headed upstairs. The second floor was warmer than the rest of the house. Not in a comfortable way. It was the kind of warmth you feel in a room that had been sealed for too long. The air was still. The carpet was thick with dust. I could see footprints. My own. Leading down the hallway. But I had never been up there before. That was when I realized it. The footprints were already there. They had been made before I walked those steps. Same pattern. Same shape. Same tread from the boots I was wearing. I followed them anyway. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not from fear. From this strange, growing pressure in my chest. Like I was walking into something I had already done before and was about to do again. The prints stopped in front of a door on the left. Slightly open. I pushed it gently and stepped inside. It was a bedroom. Bare. Floorboards cracked in the middle. A bed frame with no mattress. A mirror on the far wall. Tall. Full length. Cracked straight down the center. I walked over and looked at myself. Same clothes. Same face. Same dirt on my jacket from the cellar. But I looked different. Not physically. Not in any way I could describe. I just looked tired. Older. Worn out. Like I had been here longer than I remembered. I turned away, uneasy, and looked around the room. On the wall beside the mirror was a small calendar. The kind people used to mark dates by hand. Most of the pages were torn away. Only the month of October remained. One date was circled. October 27th. The day I arrived. Next to the circle, scratched into the wood with what looked like a knife, were the words. You have been here before. I stepped back. Sat down on the edge of the empty bed frame. My head was spinning. Was it possible? Had I really been here before? If so, why did I not remember? And why was time inside this house bending around me? Why did it want me to relive something I did not recall ever living the first time? If you want to know what I found inside the drawer beneath the mirror, and what that one object revealed about the house's memory, like this video and subscribe. I stood there for a long time in that bedroom, just staring at the wall. You have been here before. The way it was carved, shaky but deliberate, made my stomach feel hollow. I had no memory of this room, but the longer I stayed inside it, the more I felt like I did not need one. It just felt familiar. I turned back toward the tall mirror. The crack down the center had split my reflection in two, but both sides were still me. I did not look tired. I did not look afraid. I just looked distant. Like I was already halfway out of my own body. Then I noticed the drawer beneath the mirror. It was built into the frame, low, narrow, easy to miss unless you were standing right there. I pulled it open. It resisted a bit at first, like it had not been touched in years. Inside, there were only a few things. A pen. A handful of folded papers. And a small old voice recorder. One of those bulky black ones with a physical play button and a little red record light. I picked it up slowly. There was a name written in faded ink on the back. Arthur. That was my grandfather's name. I sat down on the floor and pressed play. The tape hissed for a few seconds. Then I heard his voice. This is Arthur Crowhurst. I do not know how long I have been here. The house is changing things again. Moving the rooms. Hiding the exits. I think it remembers me. I do not know if it sees me as a threat or something else. He paused. The silence that followed felt too long. Then he spoke again. I thought I could map it. I thought I could find its limits. But it is not built like other places. It folds in on itself. It repeats. It waits. The recorder clicked, then went silent. I stared at it in my hand. I had not heard his voice in more than 20 years, and now it felt like he had been speaking just minutes before I arrived. I opened the folded papers next. There were drawings, sketches of the house. Floor plans. Doorways. Corners of rooms. Handwritten notes filled the spaces between the drawings. Some were simple observations. Others sounded more urgent. Do not follow your own footsteps. Do not answer if you hear your name. And over again, the same phrase appeared. Do not trust what repeats. I set the papers down and looked around the room again. Everything felt heavier now. Like the walls were closing in, not physically, just in presence. I walked to the small table near the window. On top was a folded coat, still dusty. When I picked it up, I saw the stitched label on the inside. A. Crowhurst. He had stayed here. I do not know for how long, but he had lived in this room. He had written in it. Left behind recordings. Made plans. Tried to understand the house. Now I was standing in the same place, staring at the same mirror, and hearing the same sounds in the walls. This was not just about exploring anymore. I was tracing his steps. And for the first time since I arrived, I felt like maybe the house had not pulled me here by accident. It remembered him. And it had been waiting. But the question I could not answer was why. Why me? Why now? And what did my grandfather leave behind that the house still wanted me to find? If you want to know what I saw when I left that room and found something in the mirror that did not match my reflection, like this video and subscribe. I thought the past was something buried. I did not realize it was still walking around upstairs. I stood for a while in that room after finding the recorder and my grandfather's sketches. It felt like I had crossed some kind of threshold, like I was no longer just exploring his past, but somehow living it. The house was not just showing me clues. It was lining things up. Putting objects exactly where I needed to find them. That drawer. That coat. That recording. All of it arranged too neatly to be coincidence. I had a feeling that whatever came next would not be something left behind. It would be something waiting. I turned toward the mirror again. The crack running through the center had not changed. My reflection was still there. But the longer I looked at it, the more I started to notice something strange. I was standing perfectly still, but the version of me in the mirror was not. It was subtle at first. A shift in posture. A slight difference in the way my arms hung. I blinked. The reflection did not. I leaned in closer. My face looked the same. My clothes. The dust on my jacket. All of it matched. But something was off in the eyes. There was a heaviness in them. A kind of recognition I could not place. Then, without warning, the light bulb above me flickered. Just once. The crack in the mirror split slightly more, like glass shifting under pressure. That version of me in the mirror tilted its head, just a little to the left. I did not move. But it did. Just for a second. I stepped back immediately. That was not my reflection. Not anymore. I turned and looked behind me. The room was still. Silent. Nothing had moved. But I could feel it now. That weight in the air. Like the house had noticed I understood something I was not supposed to. I grabbed the recorder and papers, stuffed them into my backpack, and left the room. The hallway outside was darker than before. I had not noticed it dimming. There were no windows up there. Only those weak, low-hanging bulbs that gave off more shadow than light. I moved slowly, carefully, until I reached the top of the staircase. And that was when I saw something that stopped me cold. The mirror at the end of the hallway. I had not seen it before. It was full length, built into the wall like a fixture, framed in dark wood with carved patterns I could not identify. It looked older than everything else in the house. The kind of thing that belonged in a cathedral or a theater, not in a hallway like this. But what got me was not the mirror itself. It was the reflection. I could see myself standing there. Exactly where I was. But I was not alone. Someone was standing behind me. Not a shadow. Not a blur. Clear. A man. About my height. Wearing the same kind of long coat I had found earlier. His head was tilted slightly down, and though his face was hidden in the reflection, I could see enough to know he was watching me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I turned back to the mirror. Now I was alone again. But the reflection had changed. The hallway in the mirror was darker than the one I stood in. Subtly warped. Like the version of the house inside the glass was similar but not identical. The cracks in the walls were different. The wallpaper looked more decayed. And the man, if it was a man, was still there in the distance, slowly turning to walk into one of the doors that did not exist in my hallway. I stepped closer. And that was when I saw something scrawled on the bottom edge of the frame. Barely visible. Written in what looked like deep scratches across the wood. It said, in messy, uneven letters. Follow only if you remember. I did not know what that meant. I still do not. But I had a decision to make. Was the mirror showing me something from the past? Or was it showing me what would happen next? And if I followed the reflection into that door, would I find the truth about my grandfather? Or would I become part of the house like he did? After I stepped back from the mirror, I did not feel fear. I felt tired. Not the kind of tired you get from lack of sleep, but a heaviness that comes when your mind has been pulled in too many directions for too long. The house was not just showing me things anymore. It was remembering, and now I could feel it remembering me. I left the bedroom and walked the length of the upstairs hallway. It was quiet in a way I had not noticed before. Not dead silence. It was more like being deep underwater. You can hear your own body, your own steps, but everything else is distant. Slowed down. The kind of quiet that feels like something is listening. At the end of the hallway was a door I had not seen earlier. It was different from the others. Taller, framed with old dark wood, a little too perfect. No cracks, no peeling paint. The rest of the house looked like it had been falling apart for decades. But this door looked untouched. I stopped in front of it. There was no handle. Just a faint groove in the center. Almost like the wood had been worn down from hands pressing against it over time. I placed my palm there without thinking. The door did not creak. It did not resist. It opened as if it had just been waiting for me to arrive. The room on the other side was small. Not much bigger than a storage space. 4 walls, all made from the same pale wood, as if they had been replaced more recently. A thin layer of dust covered everything. And in the center of the room, there was a single chair. Someone was sitting in it. My first thought was that it might be a mannequin. The figure was so still. Upright. Both hands resting on the arms of the chair. But as I stepped closer, I saw the details. It was a man. His coat was thick and familiar. His boots were worn down at the toes. His face was thin and lined, with a short, graying beard. His eyes were closed. He was not breathing. But he was not gone, either. Not in the way a body would be after this long. He looked like he had sat down and decided not to move again. And resting across his lap was a notebook. I took it gently, careful not to disturb him. The cover was soft leather, cracked at the corners. I opened it slowly. The first page had a short note, written in handwriting I had seen before. It was my grandfather's. If you are reading this, then the house has remembered you too. The next page had sketches. The same style as the ones I had found earlier, layouts, maps, notes. Some were crossed out. Some were written over multiple times. I flipped through the pages, not trying to read everything at once. Just moving through them slowly. Letting it sink in. He had been here a long time. Not just in the house. In this room. I sat on the floor, back against the wall. It felt like the only thing I could do. I had found him. Not the way I wanted to. But I had found him. He had not escaped. And now the house had brought me to the same place. But it had not trapped me. Not yet. So I had to ask myself something I had been avoiding since I got there. What was I really here for? To find him? To understand the house? Or was there something else? Something I had not figured out yet. The room was quiet. Peaceful, even. But it did not feel final. It felt like I was standing at the end of someone else's story. And the beginning of a decision I had to make for myself. Did the house bring me here to finish what he started? Or had it been waiting for me to start something of my own? I do not know how long I sat in that room. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. The air never changed. The light never shifted. The silence stayed the same. I held my grandfather's notebook in my lap and looked at him, his body still sitting there, peaceful, like he had made peace with everything long before I ever arrived. He had been right about the house. It was not just haunted. It was not evil. It was not trying to hurt anyone. It was remembering. It remembered pain. It remembered people. It remembered moments where someone had come looking for something and never found it. And I think it remembered when someone finally stopped running and listened. That is what my grandfather had done. He stopped. He sat in that chair and stopped trying to escape. He gave in to the memory of the house, maybe hoping it would remember him kindly. But I could not do that. I stood up. Took one last look at him. Told him, in my head, that I was sorry he never made it home. That I wish I had come sooner. That I wish he had not come alone. I walked to the door. It was still open. The hallway was empty. The mirror I had come through was still there, but the reflection looked different now. It was no longer darker. No longer warped. It looked exactly like the hallway I was standing in. I walked toward it slowly. This time, when I stepped through, there was no resistance. No pressure. Just a quiet shift, like stepping from one room to another. I was back. Everything felt lighter. The air. The floor. The way the light touched the walls. I walked downstairs. Every step creaked again, just like it had when I first entered. I passed the front hallway and reached the door. It was unlocked. I opened it. And there was Rufus. He stood up the second he saw me, tail wagging low, not too fast, like he was still unsure. I knelt down, held him close. He leaned into me like he had been waiting forever. I checked the sky. It was late afternoon. Same as when I had entered. Maybe the time had really stopped. Or maybe it had never mattered in there. We walked down the path. Back through the trees. The wind had picked up a little, just enough to move the leaves. I did not look back at the house. I did not need to. I knew it was still there, but I also knew I had been let go, that I never told anyone the full story. Not the way I have told it here. Most people would not believe it anyway. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. I know what I found. The house remembered that. If you have watched this story from the beginning, thank you. So if you are here now, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this one. And tell me in the comments where you are from.